We will now move to the next submission, which is an oral presentation from Mr. Andrew Cash, MP for Davenport, as outlined in CMD 13M51.47. Mr. Cash, the floor is yours.
Merci. Je suis très content d'être ici ce après-midi. Les enjeux qui nous parlons, il est très important de les gens qui habitent dans ma circonscription, les gens qui habitent près de cette facility. I'd like to thank the Commission for its decision to hold this meeting in Toronto today. As you will know, I have been advocating for greater transparency and accountability and a real opportunity for those that I represent, the residents of Davenport, to express their concerns, ask questions, and get meaningful answers ever since first becoming aware in October 2012 of the GE Hitachi Nuclear Energy Canada facility at 1025 Lansdowne in Toronto. It's within the current ideological climate of deregulation and self-regulation promoted by the federal Conservative government that the issues before us today need to be discussed. From pipeline leaks to tainted meat to the Lac Mégantic disaster, Canadians are no longer willing to accept carte blanche that everything is safe. Canadians are awakening to the reality that rules around transparency and public accountability are essential to its ability to assess risks and make decisions whether or not to accept them. The federal government has placed a responsibility on agencies like the CNSC to ensure that corporations like GE Hitachi follow the rules of disclosure and transparency. So for the people that I represent, which includes the residents who live literally right next door and across the road from the GE facility, a robust public information program is essential. They want to know. They have a right to know. And they have been very upset and concerned that for 50 years they did not know what the GE Hitachi facility manufactured. I'll begin with this question. How important to the federal government, through the CNSC, is its requirement that GE have a robust public information and disclosure program? Is this a vital component, not just of GE's legal license to operate, but its social license as well? Or is the PIP condition a soft condition, a nudge-nudge, wink-wink requirement, so to speak? Section 2.5 of the GE Hitachi license to operate Section 2.5 of the GE license to operate its facilities in Toronto and Peterborough states that GE must have in place a public information program. The government's guidelines are clear, and I'll just quote part of them right now. The public information program and its disclosure protocol shall be commensurate with the public's perception of risk and the level of public interest in the licensed activities, which may be influenced by the complexity of the nuclear facility's life cycle and the activities, and the risk to public health and safety and the environment perceived to be associated with the facility and activities. Of course, it would be hard to assess the public's perception of risk or the public's level of interest in the activities of the factory if the public didn't know what those activities were in the first place. So if the purpose of a PIP is to inform the public, how successful has GE's been? Do people who live around the plant know that it is there, that it manufactures uranium fuel pellets for Canadian and U.S. nuclear reactors, and that weekly tons of unprocessed uranium is trucked in and fuel pellets are trucked out? Well, the answer to that question has been, at least up to now, no. The company's PIP has been a failure for the better part of 50 years, and successive governments have failed to enforce one of its most crucial license requirements. Herein lies the answer to the question often asked by people in the community. How is it that this factory could exist in such a heavily residential area and for no one to have known? The 2010 license renewal gives us some clues as to just how little effort was put into the company's PIP and how little muscle was put into its enforcement by the federal Conservative government. At the hearing, when asked directly whether residents who live right across the road from the plant knew what was being manufactured there, GE did not answer the question. When asked if the signage was clear, GE did not answer the question. When asked how often GE communicated with residents, the Commission was told that it was every 2 or 3 years or whenever there was something new to report. We know now that GE had not communicated at all with the public since 2007. In it, we also discover that GE had not even realized that a media analysis was a requirement of its PIP, even though the requirement is clearly stated in Section 5.2 of the guide that was used at that time. It was also a requirement that the company inform the public, especially residents living close to the factory, of the 2010 license renewal process. The majority of residents living on the surrounding streets, especially those that have lived in this community the longest, are working-class Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian speakers. There are dozens of local media outlets catering to these communities in their respective languages. However, GE placed a small ad in Toronto's francophone newspaper, L'Express de Toronto, the Wind Speakers page of the Aboriginal Multimedia Society website, and on page B3 of the business section of the Toronto Star for one day. No doubt that Toronto, being Canada's largest city, there is a large francophone community, there is a large Aboriginal population, and of course there is a business class. But if the purpose was to inform local residents, this communication strategy was a failure. If the purpose was simply to fulfill the bare minimum requirement to keep things quiet, then the strategy worked wonders. I make no assumption here what the intent was, but we do know what the result was, because only one person from Toronto deputed at that 2010 renewal hearing. All of this raises questions about how the federal government verifies the veracity of reports it gets from the facilities it regulates. Again, how important to the government is its requirement that facilities like the one in Toronto pursue a comprehensive information program, public information program? For the people of Davenport, the people I represent, this requirement is crucial. This requirement is crucial whether the constituent is pro-nuclear, anti-nuclear, or somewhere in between. So today, what has changed? Well, it's important to note that there have been some improvements. And I think that we in our community can take some measure of credit for that. Ontario's Ministry of the Environment conducted a soil sample test in the neighborhood. Workers in the plant have pursued further health and safety audits. CNSC updated its own regulations, and in turn GE released a new and more extensive PIP. These are all positive developments which in large measure were the result of pressure from this community. But unfortunately, the main issue persists. Too many people still don't know what this factory does. GE's new PIP is simply not adequate. While its target audience has increased to include many important community organizations, it only includes residents on one street, on Brandon. This factory is literally surrounded by residential streets, houses, low-rise townhomes, low-income high-rises, and soon a huge development of new towers, townhouses, and mixed-use units, which will house over 4,000, well over 4,000 new residents. None are named as target audiences. And despite the increased public interest in this plant, there is still not adequate signage making it clear that this is a nuclear facility, and I do take issue to a testimony I heard earlier to the contrary. There is a small sign at an underpass on Lansdowne that denotes that this is a nuclear facility, but the main sign, the sign that is the sign that's visible to the community, there's no such marking. While as the Member of Parliament for the area, I'm also listed as a primary target audience, other than one electronic flyer, I have had very little interaction with GE outside of initiatives our office has undertaken. It's also concerning to note that in Section 5.1 of the new PIP under the heading Program Activities, it states that GE will make requests for annual meetings with local municipal councillors to review the PIP. What was the rationale to exclude in this consultation the MP and the MPP, especially given that this is a federally regulated facility? Finally, The Commission asked GE during its 2010 license renewal if it had considered an option to relocate both plants to a location outside of residential areas. Representatives of GE responded that they had not considered relocating the plants, which had been already located within industrial areas for the last 120 years. One is hard-pressed to recognize this part of Toronto as industrial any longer. This is one of Toronto's fastest-growing neighborhoods with, as I've already mentioned, rapidly increasing density. Indeed, there is no other facility like this in any other urban area of the country. It's no wonder people in Davenport, neighbors of the GE plant, ask if this facility should really be operating in the heart of the city. If, for the last 50 years, GE has not been able to keep up with the demands of its public information program and the government has stood idly by, how will it succeed with thousands more people continuing to move in? Will the government have the capacity, the will, or the regulatory muscle to enforce the terms of this license? If it doesn't, how does it and the company expect to receive the social license from the residents of this community going forward? I know I've asked many questions this afternoon, but after 50 years of silence, our community deserves some answers. It's up to the federal government, through its agencies, to ensure that the rules are followed and that people are safe. Our community, neighbors of the GE facility, need to be fully aware of the risks so they can decide whether or not they want to accept them. After 50 years of silence, our community deserves nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you.